concrete walls. There's a place for us where we could go, where we could be alone. Between city lights, we don't have to hide. I wanna go, do you wanna follow? There's something in the air, I can't explain it, but it's there. Ain't nobody gonna find us in our secret love affair. I don't wanna have to hide no more, it shouldn't be unfair. I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? I can't understand why we can't hold hands, but they don't know what we have is real love. Aren't you sick and tired of having to hide? I know a place, do you wanna follow? There's something in the air, I can't explain it, but it's there. Ain't nobody gonna find us in our secret love affair. I don't wanna have to hide no more, it shouldn't be unfair. I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow?
What's up, you guys? I knew that if I didn't finish eating before I unmuted my mic, there would be a revolt. So, you're welcome. Oh, man. Well, no sense showing you the empty bowl, but a little ground beef, some Mexican spices, and the king of herbs, cilantro. The king of herbs. Some people would call it the king of herb. That would be silly, though. Cilantro. Neo Flyer says, I don't know what cilantro is. What's that? What? Yes. Oh, so good. So good. Little chunky salsa. You know what I like to do? And this is just a little tip from me to you. Just get some of those little grape or cherry tomatoes, throw them on top, and just microwave the whole thing for like 45-50 minutes. Those tomatoes get nice and hot on the inside. Oh, so good. So good. So good. Welcome to the live stream. Coriander is not cilantro. Coriander is when it's a seed. It is the same plant. It's the same plant, but one's a leaf and one's a seed. So I don't think, culinarially they are the same. 77 to 23%. Got it. Good to know. Good to know. Welcome to the live stream. Thank you to whoever at Rampage gave me this shirt. I apologize. Someone at Rampage, I was in the middle of, I don't remember what I was doing. I was going somewhere. Someone handed me this shirt Said, what size are you? It's an awesome shirt. I love it. Here's a little tip for you. If you have shirts that you put your website or your company name or like put it on the back, I don't know. Because right now, I would love to exchange. I would love to FPV Exchange Xenakis. The burrito says that's who that shirt's from. Thank you, Xenakis, from FPV Exchange. I would love to say thank you and promote you and tell everybody what a cool person you are for making and most importantly for giving me this cool shirt. But I can't because I don't remember who you were. And if your info was like on the shirt, that would be helpful. Just a little tip from anybody who makes shirts. If you want people to promote you. If you don't care, then yeah, just be punk rock like that. Willpower FPV says in Europe they call cilantro coriander. Okay. If that's how you want to do it. I don't have a problem with that. Oh, welcome. Everybody welcome. We're going to hope, I got to say, my internet has been solid for like 2 days. I don't think I've had an outage. Now that I'm streaming, it's going to go out. So fingers crossed. Definitely got to trim up the beard too, but anyway. Welcome everybody. We're going to here's what, are you new? First of all, is this your first live stream? If it's your first live stream, say hello in the chat. I always see the same 5 people, 10, 20 people, the same names that show up every week. Thank you guys, regulars. Don't want to sound ungrateful to the regulars, but I always forget that there's new people every week, and I want to be thankful for them too, because let's face it, some of you guys aren't going to be alive next week, and I need the viewers, so I need new people coming in. And by not alive, I mean your wife or husband is going to make you stop spending money on FPV stuff. And you're going to be like, all right, well, I guess I don't have to watch Bardwell's live streams anymore. I didn't mean anything, morbid. So we got to get new people. Hello, Brutal FPV. Good to have you. Hello, Duo FPV. Good to have you. License to Drive. Shut up. I know who you are. Daniel Giuliano. Do I have cilantro in my teeth? No, it looks good. Oh, I look good. Ooh, look at them pearly yellows. It feels like I have cilantro in my teeth. Hold on. Oh, man. Okay. More dignified than actually having cilantro in my teeth. Here's what we're going to do, folks. If you are new here, I'm going to answer your questions. You're going to ask questions here in the chat. I'm going to answer your questions. Jonathan Janelle is watching my stream instead of going to church. Well, I don't know what God thinks of that, but I approve. Hey! You guys can ask questions. I'll answer the questions. I got it. Okay, I got it. Thank you so much to these folks on the right side of the screen. These are my patrons over in my Discord server. And without them, I would have to get a real job. I'll be taking questions from them as well. And if you want to make sure that I read your message, this is how it works. Right down here at the bottom of the screen, hit the $, leave a super chat. Make sure you type your message. Make sure you type your message before you buy the super chat. Because sometimes people just send a super chat and don't realize that that's how it works. And we currently have no super chats, so you will get in first on the list. And, in like 20 minutes when I actually start reading them, I'm just going to be honest, that's usually how it goes. Oh, can I get the link of the Discord server? Yes, by joining my Patreon. That's one of the only things that I hold back for patrons only. I give everything else away for free, including all of this. But the Discord server, you got to join my Patreon, link down below. Let's get some questions. Let's take some questions. I always like to start by taking some questions from the YouTube chat before I start diving into all the patrons and the super chats. Ale FPV View says, I'm a beginner. Should I pay more attention to acro mode or try to master angle mode first? There are two separate things. Learning to fly in angle mode, basically the only thing it helps you with is throttle control. More or less. I guess to some degree it helps you know what the sticks do, pitch, roll, and yaw. But for the most part, learning to fly in angle mode and learning to fly in acro mode are really a different skill set. So you could make an argument that you start in angle mode and you focus on throttle control and altitude management. And then you switch to acro mode and you learn the other skills. But really, I think if what you want to do is fly in acro mode because your goal is to race or to do freestyle, then you should start in acro mode in the simulator. Because once you know how to use acro mode, angle mode is, you're just like, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. And then it just kind of clicks. But going from angle to acro, I think it doesn't click. It's a different skill. So, and I'm not sure that being good in angle mode actually makes you that much better in acro mode. Although I could be wrong about that. So I would say start in the simulator, start in acro mode, and just sort of figure it out in the simulator and then go to real life. If you're like, well, I don't have a computer that can run a simulator, or for some reason you can't use a simulator, then I could see an argument for starting in angle mode just to kind of figure out what the controls do and how the throttle works. But eventually you're just going to have to go to acro mode. And it's going to be a complete shift. That's the thing. No matter how good you are in angle mode, or if you have experience flying DJI drones in like normal position mode, you kind of know what the sticks do. But the first time you go to acro mode, it's going to just like completely confuse you. And usually what happens is you're used to holding the stick forward to go forward. So in acro mode, you hold the stick forward and the quad just goes and just keeps spinning, and you're like, what the hell is going on? And you have to kind of rewire your brain. And Abraham makes an argument that learning in angle mode is sort of a waste of time and holds you back. And there's some truth to that if what you want to do is fly freestyle or racing, that you should just get on with learning acro mode, because that's what you're going to be using. The main place that angle mode is used is indoors with tiny whoops and other small quads that have prop guards on, because when you bounce off the wall in angle mode, the quad can respond and level itself out way faster than you ever could. Although many whoop racers now are switching to acro mode because they can be faster. So that's my take on that. That's my take. Dave Rothery. Wow, that's bad. Dave Rothery says, first crash with a new drone, flying very slow and a gentle crash. 4 magnets in one motor became dislodged. Manufacturing flaw or just bad luck? Dave, obviously, I wasn't there for your crash, so I can't say for sure whether this is a manufacturing flaw or whether you crashed it hard enough to damage it. But I think that I would rather see the motor be deformed than the magnets drop loose. I think that if you have a motor that's dropping magnets pretty much period, then that's a manufacturing flaw. Like, I've seen motors that got just the absolute crap banged out of them. The bell is bent, dinged, dented, and the magnets are still attached. So if you had a crash that didn't deform the motor bell at all, didn't bend the motor shaft, the motor still is essentially intact, and you dropped magnets, I would say that's a manufacturing flaw. You want to tell us what motor it is, Dave? Yeah. Let's see here. Going back in the Discord, we'll get some questions here from the Discord. I saw a few of them coming in before we got started. Sync Happens has a question. Thank you for being a patron, Sync Happens. Appreciate it. Sync Happens, I can't bring your question up because my plugin has timed your question out. Oh well. It only seems to go back. It doesn't seem to go back very far. I wish you could change that. Anyway, Sync Happens question is, I have a new Radiomaster TX16S Max with the 4-in-1 module. Bound it to my Mobula 6 DSMX. Ooh, DSMX. Wow. Okay, fair enough. It is what it is. The channel monitor shows the endpoints as 998 to 2012, but Betaflight only shows 1090 to 1900. I can get the quad to ARM if I change the high and low stick thresholds, but I feel like I shouldn't have to do that. Any thoughts? Okay, so Sync Happens. 2 thoughts here. First of all, I would go into the CLI on the flight controller. Hang on, we're going to demonstrate this. I would go into the CLI on the flight controller. And thank you. And I would type RX range, and I would verify that the RX range looks like this, 1000 to 2000. If at some point someone changed the RX range away from these values, then the endpoints that you see in your receiver tab would be affected by that change. And if you don't have that, then is there a preset to reset RX range? I wonder. I don't know about that. Let's just double. I'm curious. I'd be curious to know that. We'll go to the Betaflight official presets, and let me just search for RX range. No. All right, one could make a preset to reset RX range, but it looks like you'll just have to manually type RX range 0, 1000, 2000, etc. RX range 1, RX range 2, RX range 3. So assuming that RX range is set correctly, then what could cause your endpoints to be off? It turns out, I think that Spectrum has always had this problem. I remember on the DSMX, on like the DX9, if you had an old DSMX receiver with a Spectrum DX9 radio, you would have to set the endpoints to like plus minus 125% to get them to line up right in Betaflight. So what I would do is you have basically 2 choices. You can use RX range, and it sounds like that might be what you have to do. Or you could change the output screen of your radio to be plus or minus 100. You're going to need to enable the option extended limits. And then once you enable extended limits, you can set your outputs to be wider. Or in Betaflight, you can use RX range to fix this. But here's the thing you don't want to do. Don't just change your stick low threshold to allow you to ARM. Get your endpoints correct, because there will be other effects of not having the correct endpoints. All right? So either use RX range or use the output screen in your radio to fix the endpoints, but don't... does RX range reset? Did they add that? I've wanted that for a while. I'll be super happy if it turns out they did that. Did they? Well, I don't know what's happening now. Nothing's happening. It didn't. Well, I'll be gosh darn. I did not know they'd done that. I don't know when that got added, but I'm super happy. I'll remember that going forward. Thank you for pointing that out. Alrighty. So sync happens. That's what I will say. In the output screen, sync happens. In the output screen, that's where you change your endpoints. Or just use RX range in Betaflight. That'll work fine. Continuing with questions from the patrons in the Discord. Tasty Shrimp says, I've got an iFlight H7 Beast flight controller. What's the proper Betaflight version to enable D-Shot? You have to be running 4.3. I believe that H7 does not support bidirectional D-Shot, or maybe D-Shot at all, under 4.2. So I don't know, like I would do 4.3 RC7. You do need 4.3. Is it fixed? I would hope so. 4.3 is almost ready to release, so I hope they fixed it, but I don't know that for sure. Let's see here. All right. There was most of the questions from the Discord. Got that. Why is JB not using Bubby Flight Configurator? What is this? Is this really a thing? Is this real? Did someone make a version of Betaflight Configurator and call it Bubby Flight Configurator? That's adorable, if true. I don't know if that's actually a thing that someone released. Let's get some super chats going. We got some super chats coming in. Oh, there was one other question. Sorry. There was one other question about smart audio. Do all video transmitters have smart audio? Yes, most of them do today. Where was that question? Do all VTXs, White Wolf wants to know, do all VTXs have smart audio? Most all of them made today do, but some of them don't. It's not a guarantee. Okay, let's get some super chats out of the way. Jekli, thank you for €2. Mob 6 or Mob 7? Mob 6. The 75mm size was a concession to a time when people wanted more sort of power and flight time out of a tiny whoop. And it's like the only way to do that was to go to a larger battery and a larger, like a 2S battery and bigger motors. Today, there's no reason to make that compromise. The 65mm size is perfect. You know, that's like asking if you put a bigger engine in a Miata, would you make it a better car? Okay, it's a car analogy. Not everybody's going to click with it. The Miata is a perfect car for what it is. It doesn't need to be bigger, faster, heavier. It doesn't, I mean, yes, there are people who make these mods, you know, and that's cool too. But a 65mm tiny whoop like the Mob 6, it's perfect. Don't change what it is. There are ways you can make it better. Like some people might like higher kV motors or lower kV motors or different props. But at the end of the day, you're not going to make a tiny whoop better by taking it up to 75mm. In fact, I feel like, and this is just my personal take, and granted, I don't fly tiny whoops as much as a lot of people do. I mostly fly 5-inch, so, you know, what the hell do I know? But it's my live stream, so I'll do whatever I want. I think the 75 and 85mm sizes are, I'm not going to go so far as to say pointless. Like, for example, if you want to carry an Insta360 Go 2, that you're gonna have a hard time doing that on a 65, and you're going to do better on a 75 or an 85. So there are some use cases for them. But just in terms of pure flying, a 65 is perfect. A 75 and 85, kind of pointless. And then you get up to the 95mm size, and now you can carry a naked GoPro. Now you can fly outdoors and do Cinewhoop style shots with a 95mm. But in general, I'm going to take a 65 over a 75 or an 85 just about any time. 75 is kind of just sort of, yeah. The compromises you used to make with a 75mm, you don't have to make them anymore because 65s fly so freaking good. And 75s are bigger and heavier. Oh, well, some people disagree. That's why it's a beautiful, beautiful wide world. Dave Rothery, thank you for £1.79. Happy Model Crux 3.5 is the... What is Dave asking about? I know I got his question. First crash with a new drone. Oh, Happy Model Crux 3.5. Damn, ouch. Yeah, no, sadly, clearly a manufacturing flaw. I doubt you were going fast enough with a Crux 3.5 to really ding a motor. It's such a small, light quad. Unfortunately, Dave, you know, especially on these inexpensive... I don't want to... Happy Model has generally done a pretty good job in the last little while in terms of build quality. There was a time when, like, you'd buy a Mobula 6 and you'd cross your fingers every time you plugged it in. And I feel like they've gotten better at that. But at the end of the day, on a Happy Model Crux 35, I think there's maybe only so much durability you can expect. And if it was me, I would probably just buy some spare motors and cross my fingers that it didn't happen again, because I don't know how much satisfaction you're going to get trying to get somebody to, like, acknowledge that it's a defect and replace the motor for you. Predator Freeland, thank you for a $5 super chat. I got an Emax ready to fly kit, the one that you did a video on recently. Can I improve my signal antennas? Are the goggles diversity? If it matters, the drone has a linear antenna. Predator, so to get better range out of that, I do think it would be worth putting better antennas on. And my personal opinion is that it is always good to have circular antennas on your goggles. So here is what, let's generalize that question. How does antenna polarity work, and why do I think it's always a good idea to have circular antennas on your goggles? So antenna polarization is a spectrum from left-hand polarized through linear to right-hand polarized. Okay? First of all, people think that antenna polarization is left, right, or linear. It's not. It's actually a spectrum. And there's a parameter called the axial ratio, which measures the degree of polarization left to right through linear. So when we say we have a left-hand polarized antenna, what we mean is that it has been designed to be strongly left-hand polarized, but depending on the design of the antenna, some may be more left-hand and some may be less left-hand polarized than the others. Regardless, let's simplify this, though, and say that antennas are either 100% left, 100% right, or linear polarized. With left and right-hand polarization, the advantage is that the polarization of the signal does not depend on the orientation of the antenna. So if you think about like a stick pointing straight up and down, okay? And you rotate that 90 degrees, okay? And imagine a signal coming out of that oriented in the plane of that stick, okay? So the signal is coming out straight towards you. And that signal can be up or down, or if we rotate it, the signal can be left and right. That's a linear antenna. That's an analogy for a linear antenna. And if you imagine another one foisting straight up and down, if those two antennas are not aligned correctly, the signal coming from the one will not get picked up by the other. Okay? That's how linear antennas work. When you have two linear antennas, they need to be in the same orientation, literally the same orientation. The worst case scenario is when they're 90 degrees out of phase. Best case scenario is either 0 or 180 degrees in phase is the same. But with circular polarized antennas, the polarization of the signal does not depend on the orientation of the antenna. So you can have two left-hand polarized antennas and you can rotate and pivot them any which way, and the polarization will always match. They've baked the polarization of the antenna into the design of the antenna, and it is independent of the position or the orientation of the antenna. So this is one of the reasons why circular polarized antennas are very useful on multirotors, because multirotors are constantly changing orientation. And if you have a linear antenna on a multirotor, as it rotates its orientation, you could get in, let's imagine that you have a linear antenna on your goggles facing straight up and a linear antenna on your quad facing straight up, and they're perfectly aligned. And then you bank over. Now they're misaligned. And as it rotates, you're gonna get big dips in signal strength depending on the relative orientation of the antennas. Now, Shady asks, isn't the worst case pointing at each other end to end? Shady, you're thinking about the antenna's propagation pattern. That is a separate thing from the antenna's polarization. Polarization and propagation. Propagation is where it puts the energy, okay? Polarization is, in the case of a linear antenna, polarization relates to the orientation of the antenna. And so does the propagation pattern, where it puts, which direction it puts the energy. But they're two separate things. And one of the things that complicates talking about polarization is that people don't distinguish between polarization and the propagation pattern of the antenna. Okay, so the question is, what happens when you combine a linear antenna with a circular polarized antenna? So what ends up happening is that you get a small amount of loss, maybe about 3 dB of loss for those who know dB. But that amount of loss is constant and independent of the orientation of the antenna. When you have two linear antennas, when they're lined up perfectly, you get like 0 dB of loss. And when they're misaligned by 90 degrees, you can get as much as maybe 15 dB of loss, maybe more. It's pretty significant. And so as the quad is rotating, the amount of loss is going way up and way down. Whereas if you have a circular antenna on your goggles and a linear antenna on your quad, you always get a small amount of loss, but it's always the same small amount of loss. And that is why I always think it's a good idea to run a circular antenna on your goggles, even if you have a tiny whoop with a linear antenna on the quad. Now, it's better to have a circular antenna on the quad. Then you don't get a small amount of loss. But even if you have a linear antenna on the quad, I would rather have a consistent signal with a small amount of loss than a signal that sometimes is really good and sometimes is really bad and just sort of goes all over the place. Okay, so that's polarization. White Wolf wants to know, is there a good video out there that explains rates? Yes, there is, White Wolf. In fact, boom, I just released it, May 27th. May 27th, I released this video. I'll put it in the chat for you, my friend. I hope that helps. Also, White Wolf, I would also suggest, and you know what, I haven't even seen this video yet. Look at that beautiful beard. I haven't even seen this video yet, but when Stinger Swarm releases a video that's called Finding the Right Rates for You, that's good enough for me. I am happy to promote it. The difference is that my video is more of sort of a, let's see if does he bring up the, it's a little dark, Stingy. What are you doing with your color grade there, man? I would bring that up just a little bit. But love that bokeh. It's a beautiful camera. Just need a little fill light on the eyes. Bring that in. There we go. There we go. That's better. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, so check that out. I guess is what I would say. Okay. Here's an interesting method for finding rates. Yeah, my recommendation for finding rates is, number one, use actual rates unless you have been using Betaflight rates forever and you just know what rates you like. If you're starting from scratch, use actual rates, set the max rate parameter based on how fast you want it to flip or roll, and then adjust the center and the expo based on how soft you want the center. And that's basically it. Okay, continuing with the super chats. We will get back to the other questions, but let's just catch up on the super chats a little bit. Saucy Beast Mode, thank you for a $2 super chat. Is it worth switching to the Happy Model module if I have the Beta FPV Express LRS module? If you're happy with the performance of the Beta FPV module is very good if you get one that ain't broke. If you're happy with the performance of the Beta FPV module, then there's no reason to switch. Shaddai, thank you for a $5 super chat. Just wanted to give you a shout out for all the help you've given me. Also, shout out to It's Blunty for putting this content into the searchable clips. Yeah, so I don't know if you guys know this, but It's Blunty has recently taken over. What has he taken over? It's Blunty has recently taken over my Livestream clips channel. I was actually about to cancel it and shut it down. Just because it was too much work for me to go back through the live streams and find the best clips. And Blunty said, well, I've always wanted to run a YouTube channel, but I don't want to make the content. Can I run it? So It's Blunty. You can tell from the thumbnails when he took over. Jeez, he's been busy. Wow. So this is right about when he took over. Like right here is when he took over a month ago. So if you watch my live streams, if you enjoy my live stream content, but you don't always get to catch the whole live stream, you can find all the fun stuff we do, including the news, but also, is Bardwell a jerk when live stream troubleshooting? Just little excerpts like that. Oh, hang on. That's not what I meant to move. Yep. So, yeah, I'm going to bet that most of you don't watch the whole live stream start to finish. So you should go subscribe to the Livestream Clips channel. Let's see if people are subscribing right now. 3.3K subscribers. I want to see 3.4. No? Okay, fine. Oscar Harrison, thanks for a $5 super chat. No question from you, Oscar. I hope that was just intended to be a donation and I'm not missing your question. Sander DeBronner is answering a question in the chat about polarization. The combination of linear with right and left doesn't matter. It's equally bad. If you have a linear on the quad, it's equally bad to have a right or left-hand polarized antenna on your goggle. And it's not that bad. It's about 3 dB of loss, but it doesn't matter. It's equally bad. Chris P. FPV says, it's been 18 months since I found your channel and 13 months of flying. It's your fault. I have a new addiction. Thank you for £5, Chris P. Welcome to the addiction. Andy G. Thank you for a $10 super chat. R quality, link quality stays at 100% on my radio and T quality changes. I'm trying to monitor LQ with Tracer and DJI goggles using your Betaflight Fork video. What's the difference and does it matter? So Andy G, again, thank you for a $10 super chat. Very generous of you. The gist of your question, Andy, is what's the difference between R QLE and T QLE, T quality? So R QLE and T QLE are link quality. R is the link quality from the receiver to the radio. No, the other way. I apologize. I'm going to F it up and get it backwards. R QLE is the receiver link quality. In other words, that is the link quality that the receiver sees for the signal being sent by the controller. T QLE is telemetry link quality. So think R is receiver, T is telemetry. The receiver sends telemetry data back to the radio. And there is a link quality for that transmission as well. And that is the T QLE. So the reason that your T link quality, your telemetry link quality changes is that the telemetry transmission is much weaker than the control link transmission. And so it's going to go down a lot faster. Generally, when we talk about LQ, we mean the R QLE, the receiver link quality, because that's what determines when you lose control and fail safe. Bulldog FPV wants to know, Is it okay to run a linear antenna with Crossfire on a tiny whoop? Thanks for a $5 super chat, Bulldog. All Crossfire antennas are linear. Right? Yes. There's no such thing as a Crossfire antenna that's... There's a dipole, there's the Min Immortal T, which is still, I think, a folded dipole, just like a quarter wave or an eighth wave length. They're all linear. So as it has to be tuned to 900 megahertz. In general, as long as the antenna is tuned to 900 megahertz, you'll be fine. Yeah. Now, there's some questions here about this antenna setup. Ooh, this is controversial. Thank you, Mads Halverson, for this video. I just want to find the actual antenna. Okay. The Maple Wireless Mjolnir antenna. Now, Maple Wireless have tried to do something clever here, and to me, it doesn't make sense, and I can't tell, and I legitimately can't tell, whether I'm just not smart enough to understand what's happening here, or whether this is marketing BS, and I see through it. Okay? Obviously, I think of course, it's the latter. But I don't know. Let's explain what's going on here. The Maple Wireless antenna system combines two circular omni antennas. Wait. And 4 adapters. That combines a left and a right hand. Yes, the polarization is left/right. Now, first of all, there's no such thing as an antenna that is both left and right hand polarized. An antenna that was designed to be equally left and right polarized would actually just be linear. Okay? That's how you make a linear antenna. Okay, that's one way to think about it. So, what we've got here, I believe, is 2 left hand and 2 right hand polarized antennas. Okay? Now, the theory here is, and this is a fact, this is true, this is not a theory. When a left-hand polarized signal reflects off an object, it reverses its polarization and becomes right-hand polarized. And that actually is a selling point. It allows the receiver to reject multipath because the direct path coming into the antenna will have the correct polarization. The reflected multipath interference will have the opposite polarization, and therefore it will be sort of weaker, filtered out by the antenna. So the theory is that if you put a left and a right-hand polarized antenna on your goggles, then when you get a bounced signal with reversed polarization, you'll still be able to pick it up. Which is true. But I'm not convinced that that gives you better coverage. So, first of all, one of the things you're doing, when you have 4 antennas, you've got some kind of diversity situation. You might have spatial diversity, where those antennas point different directions, or where one antenna is an omni and one's a directional. So you're adding spatial diversity, meaning you can cover different physical areas. When you switch from spatial diversity and you put mismatched antennas, like one's left hand and one's right hand, you're trading spatial diversity for a different kind of diversity. You're trading it for polarization diversity. Okay. I mean, you could make an argument that that's worth doing, but you want to realize that there's a trade-off here. Now, with the DJI system, this is not just a diversity setup. They've got 4 antennas here. Some are transmitting, some are receiving, some are doing both. I don't actually know fully what's going on here. But DJI designed this system to have 4 antennas all covering basically the same area. So DJI, theoretically, we can infer that they didn't design this to have spatial diversity. that they designed it to have some other thing going on. So in theory, there could be an advantage here. But here's why I'm not sold on polarization diversity, because we've seen this before. We've seen this before. I'll clear that overlay. It didn't need to be there. We've seen this before in analog, where people try to sell a left and a right hand polarized. The problem with that is that it assumes that the bounced path is going to be as strong or stronger than the direct path. And I'm not convinced that that will usually be true. But it's not impossible. If you think about it, if you're in a situation where you've got a direct path between you and the quad, an unobstructed line of sight, and there's a bounce, okay? You absolutely would rather have the direct path, because every time there's a bounce, you're going to lose some signal strength. So that's just a fact. You would not want to have a left-hand polarized and a right-hand polarized bringing both of those signals in. Although, if you had a good diversity system, it would detect that the left-hand polarized one was weaker, the right-hand polarized one was stronger, and it would select for the direct path. But in that case, what advantage are you getting by having a cross-polarized antenna? You're still rejecting the multipath through the diversity algorithm. You're not benefiting. Okay. The theoretical case where having mixed polarization would make sense would be if you had an obstructed direct path, like there's a big wall or something, and your direct signal is going through the wall and losing a lot of strength, and there's a bounced path that goes around the wall, and so by cross-polarizing your antennas, you'll pick up that bounced path and it'll be stronger. I just think that that's a pretty specific situation. And I'm not convinced that what you're giving up, because if you think about it, when you have cross-polarized antennas like this, the whole time that you have a direct path, your right-hand antenna is basically not being used. You've essentially thrown away half of your antennas, because you've got a right-hand polarized antenna on the quad, and you got two right-hand antennas and two left-hand antennas on your goggles, which means that the whole time you actually have clear line of sight, you're just throwing away two of your antennas. I'm not convinced that trade-off is worth it. So we really need to see a test. I thought Wesley Vardy did this test. I know Wesley Vardy tested the Mjolnir antenna in clear line of sight environment, and it did worse than the iFlight Crystal. And he said he was going to test it like in a parking garage, but I'm not sure if he ever did, because I don't remember seeing it. So theoretically, this works better in a line of sight environment, in a high multipath environment with obstructed line of sight. But I think it's a pretty specific situation. The other thing is, yeah, we'd have to test it. Maybe I'll test it. I thought Wesley Vardy was going to test it, and I was just going to let him do it. But I don't think he's done it. He must have got busy, so maybe I'll have to do it. Anyway. Let's see here. Sandra Dubronner. Sandra Dubronner is a smart person about RF. He's in the Discord. I'm curious if he thinks I'm missing anything there, or if I've gotten something wrong. Nate Strandberg, if your Discord invite expired, DM me on Patreon. I'll send you another one. Yeah, and Shady says, don't they sell it as a long-range antenna, which makes even less sense? Yeah. Yep. Because for long-range, you absolutely are never... If you're truly doing long-range, you're always going to have an unobstructed direct path, and therefore you would always want to reject any multipath bounces. And the question I go back to is, what are you giving up? Why did DJI design this goggle with 4 matching antennas? And what we're doing by putting cross-polarized antennas here is saying, some of the time, we're going to get much worse signal to 2 of those antennas because they're not polarized correctly. And maybe some of the time, we'll get better signal, but when are those times? Sandra DeBronner says it would take an hour or more to discuss it. Well, he didn't say I was wrong. The other thing is, and Jaloman brings this up, Jaloman says, I think polarization is overrated in general. I run left-hand polarized while buddies are running right-hand polarized. We don't notice a big difference when we're watching each other. Yeah, so, you know, you're going to lose, if you're truly cross-polarized, you're going to lose, theoretically, 10 or 15 dB of signal strength, which is significant. For perspective, a 6 dB change in signal strength is a doubling or halving of range, roughly. So if you're losing 12 dB, that's 1/4 the range. So in theory, a left-hand polarized antenna watching a right-hand polarized transmitter would get 1/4 the range compared to a right-hand polarized one. But in real life, we do this and we don't notice that big of a difference. And I think one of the reasons is that these antennas that we're buying aren't actually as strongly polarized as they're supposed to be. I don't have the data to back that up. Sandra DeBronner says it's up to 30 dB. Yeah. That's even higher. 30 dB is huge. I suspect that, and the other thing is that because there are bounces in the environment, the signal is reflecting all over the place. You could transmit a 100% right-hand polarized signal. It goes out into the environment and it bounces all over the place. And what actually comes into your antenna is not 100% right-hand polarized. So I think in reality, the mismatch is not as big a deal as it would be in the lab. And frankly, if people do get better performance with these antennas, I wonder if they're just really nice antennas. But to really know, we'd need to put them on a test rig and like test their polarization, test their, you know, all their parameters. So, okay, let's get off that topic and talk about something else. Otis, thank you for a $5 super chat. Could we use a dish of decent size to reach out better in the direction it's pointing? Yeah, but with like a 25 dBi dish might have a 2-degree beam width. The beam is going to be so narrow that you're not going to really be able to fly anywhere except straight out and straight back. Elias M wants to know, why is the video link frequency at 5.8 gigahertz and not something like 900 megahertz? Well, Elias, 900 megahertz is no good for video because the bandwidth of the 900 megahertz frequency spectrum, that frequency band is only like, I think it's like 15 megahertz. It's pretty narrow. And you need something like 25, 26 megahertz for an NTSC signal. So you literally couldn't fit an NTSC video signal in the 900 megahertz frequency band. But people use 2.4 gigahertz, they use 1.3 gigahertz, and that's fine. The main reason that 5.8 is so popular is the antennas are small, so they're easy to mount on aircraft. And there is a huge amount of frequency bandwidth in 5.8 gigahertz. There's like, I think it's like 300 megahertz, 385 megahertz or something. So you can get a lot of transmitters and a lot of devices in there. So 5.8 gigahertz, small antennas, inexpensive transmitters, and lots of bandwidth, so you can have lots of pilots up at the same time. Also, with 5.8 gigahertz, there's no real issues with, like, if you're running 1.3 gigahertz, there may be harmonics that affect your controlling, but with the video at 5.8 gigahertz, there's none of those issues. Alrighty. Unfair Frame 653 asks, does the nylon in the prop nuts wear out if I keep them tight all the time? The nylon in the prop nuts wears out. I think the more you take the nuts on and off, it wears out eventually. But no, keeping them tight, I don't think that makes it wear out faster. I don't know, but I don't think it makes them wear out faster. Tim Barth in the Discord. Tim, thank you for being a patron. If you guys want to join Tim over in the Discord server and feel good, hopefully feel good about supporting me, there's a link in the video description to my Patreon page. Patreon's a website where you can support me for as little as $2 a month or more if you feel like I've earned it, however much you want to throw in the hat. You just sign up on Patreon every month. You give me a couple bucks. Just you don't ever have to think about it again, to be honest with you. Unless you want to raise your Patreon amount, then think about it. No. I mean, yeah, but no. There's a link in the video description. I like to say, if today's the day I earned it, I'd love to have you as a subscriber. If I haven't earned it yet, keep watching. I'll keep making content, and maybe that day will come. Tim Barth says, today when I was out flying, I plugged in my quad, and a motor smoked instantly. Any ideas? So if the motor smokes as soon as you plug in, what could cause that? Like, generally an ESC will not put current through to the motor until you arm and raise the throttle. Okay? So if an ESC smokes the motor instantly, oftentimes it means one of the FETs on the ESC has failed, and it is just passing VBAT directly through the motor unrestricted, and of course immediately the motor fries. You can test for that with a multimeter. You can test for continuity between the XT60 positive pin and the output pins on the motor. And if with a battery unplugged, if you have continuity between XT60 positive and the output on the motor, or sorry, the output on the ESC, then the FET is fried. Now at this point, now that something has smoked, the ESC may have smoked. You may not have continuity anymore, but you may. But the ESC also beeps the motors, doot, 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 and in some cases, those beeps can be enough to fry it if there's something damaged. So we don't know for sure whether the motor is damaged, but I mean, the motor's damaged now. What I would do is I would test the ESC with a multimeter in continuity check mode, test for continuity between the XT60 positive prong and the 3 motor outputs. And then if there is continuity there, it means you have a bad FET. Let's see here. Aethix wants to know, could you use a 5.8 gigahertz amplifier to get better range in your goggles? Here's why receive amplifiers are a waste of time. Now, everybody knows that transmit amplifiers are awesome. If your video transmitter outputs 500 milliwatts and you crank that up to 2 watts, it makes sense that you're going to get more range. You are shouting louder. Your signal is more powerful, you're going to get more range. That's not really, no one is confused about that. But putting an amplifier on your quad is big and heavy, and it adds weight. It sucks up your battery life. Meh, who wants to do that? So people have this clever idea. Well, you can get a receive amplifier, and you could have that on the ground and put the amplifier on your goggles. Ha-ha! I've tricked the system. I found the loophole. They don't know I know this trick. Yeah, it doesn't work like that, though. And here's why. The amplifier is going to amplify whatever signal comes into it. So think about what's coming into your antenna on your goggles. You've got a video signal coming in, and let's say that signal is at like negative 90 dBm. Like a really weak signal, but still strong enough that it could be received. So you've got that signal coming in. It's being transmitted way up here at, 2 watts. And it's coming in way down here at negative 90 dBm. Okay? And let's say that the noise floor, the ambient background noise, which is always there. Think about it. If I stop talking right now, can you hear my air conditioning in the background? Well, I don't know if you can. But think about it. There's always background noise everywhere, right? In the RF spectrum, there's always background noise. Now, some places have more background noise than others. Here at my house, if I shut my Wi-Fi network down, probably there would not be a lot of background noise. We might have a noise floor down around negative 115 or 120 dBm. Maybe. If I go, in the middle of Manhattan, the noise floor is going to be like negative 60 dBm or something ridiculous because of all that Wi-Fi and garbage. So let's say my video signal's coming in at negative 90 dBm and my noise floor is negative 95 dBm. What's my signal to noise ratio? It's 5 dB. Now, let's say that that's enough. I got a signal, it's coming in at negative 90 dBm with a 5 dB signal to noise ratio. Now, let's say I feed that into an amplifier. What is the amplifier going to do? It's going to amplify everything. It's going to amplify the signal, and it's going to amplify the noise. So the key takeaway here is that a receive amplifier cannot change your signal to noise ratio because it cannot distinguish the signal from the noise. It amplifies the signal, it amplifies the noise. And if you've got a situation where your signal's coming in too close to the noise floor and getting lost, a receive amplifier doesn't fix that. It just gives you a louder signal that you can't tell the signal from the noise. Right? It's like this. Let's say I was in a room, except instead of a nice, quiet air conditioner, I was in like some industrial place with a giant blower fan. And the giant blower fan was so loud that you literally couldn't hear my voice. And I give you a recording. And all you can hear is the fan. And I give you a recording of that. And you turn up the volume on the recording. Well, now all you hear is through the fan. You can't, the signal to noise ratio is the same. So receive amplifiers, not the magic bullet that people think it is. Oh, now Mr. Fowl's got a good question. Hang on, Mr. Fowl. I'm going to get your question. So what are receive amplifiers good for? Because they do exist, so they must have a purpose. A receive amplifier is useful when the incoming signal has enough signal to noise ratio that it could be discerned, but the receiving circuitry itself needs more power to actually get the signal, which is almost never the case because it's really easy to build a receiver with very, very low internal noise. Okay. Tim Bart confirms the FETs are burned on the ESC. There you go. Just following up for anyone who was curious about Tim's situation. Okay. Have you guys heard about this thing where people are running their goggles with no antennas at whoop races? This is a thing. What the hell are they doing? What the hell are they doing? I know. I want to make a video about this, but I need DVR. I'm calling out a request. I did this at a whoop race, and I was like, oh, crap, that's really interesting. But I don't have the DVR from that race anymore. I don't know where it went. It's gone. I can't make this video without DVR to show the before and after. So if you fly Tiny Whoops, if you are at a Tiny Whoop race and you can get me a before and after of with and without antennas, showing how without antennas it gets better, I would love to make a video about that, and I'd love to credit you. You can email me, joshuabardwell@gmail.com. Here's what's going on there. In a Tiny Whoop race indoors, there's oftentimes a crap load of multipath. What's multipath? Multipath happens when the signal goes out, it bounces back, and you are seeing the direct signal from the transmitter and the bounced path at the same time. Well, as you know, anytime you get a bounced path, the longer path takes more time. So the direct signal arrives, the bounced signal comes in, and the bounced signal is slightly offset in time from the direct signal, and they interfere with each other. Okay? And what that looks like in your DVR and in your goggles is white flashes. Pop, 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 pop. Now, if you've got a rapid fire, it does a pretty good job, or a TBS Fusion, or a Rapid Mix from SkyZone. They do a pretty good job of filtering out these white flashes. But if you ever put your goggle into diversity mode, or if you don't have one of those advanced receivers, you'll see these white flashes. It's a pain in the ass. It looks terrible. It's very distracting. So people start taking off their antennas, and suddenly these multipath flashes go away. How is that possible? Here's what's happening. The multipath signal is weaker than the direct signal from the quad. So you've got the direct signal coming in, and you've got the multipath signal bouncing off the wall or something and coming in. And because it took a longer path, and because it bounced in all directions, so that signal energy has been dissipated, the bounced signal is weaker, but it's still strong enough to interfere. By removing your antennas, all of the incoming signals get weaker. And what happens is that the goggles have an internal sort of noise floor, and anything below the internal noise floor of the goggles is just going to get lost. And when you take your antennas off, what you're doing is you're making the multipath signal go below the noise floor of the goggles, while the direct signal is still strong enough to be above the noise floor of the goggles, and suddenly the multipath goes away. Now, you're losing range. You have less range. But in a tiny whoop race, you may not need much range. So you still have enough range to fly your quad, but the multipath bounces go away. And that's what happens. Night Owl confirms it helped a lot at the local whoop area at Rampage. Again, if anybody has DVR, a clear before and after. Here's what it looked like with antennas. Multipath flashes all over the place. Here's what it looked like without antennas. Boom, they're gone. That's what I need to make this video. Why don't I just go out and make the video? I'll just make it. I don't know. Eventually I will. So that's why, and the takeaway is, this is not bogus, it's not bullshit, it's not like placebo effect. It's real, it has a real theoretical basis, and if you're at a tiny whoop race and you're getting just tons of white flashes all over the place, or some people are saying they get a little bit of ghosting with rapid fire, try taking your antennas off. You'll get much reduced range, but you may have enough range to fly, and it may fix the multipathing. Very cool. Matt Sleep, thank you for 35 South African Rand. Is it possible to run a VTX with an operating voltage of 7 to 36 volts off a mini flight controller that only has 5 volt outputs? No. So, Matt, in general, I mean, maybe. So hang on, maybe. In general, you need to provide enough voltage for the thing to work. It's almost never the case that if you provide less than the minimum voltage, that you'll kind of get it to kind of work some, but not. It's not 100%. Usually what's happening is that they have voltage regulators on board that VTX, and those voltage regulators require a certain input voltage. And if you don't give them the right input voltage, they just don't work, and the whole thing doesn't work. Now, it is possible that VTX, which is rated for 7 to 36 volts, still would work on 5 volts. It's possible that they've just misstated the input voltage, but in general, I wouldn't expect it to work. So what you would need to do is get a step-up regulator, I suppose, or run it directly off of VBAT. I'm going to assume this is like a 1S whoop, a 1S tiny whoop or something that only has 5 volt outputs. Can you just run it off of VBAT though, Matt? Why not just run it off of VBAT, unless your VBAT is 1S? Nate Strandberg, thank you for a $5 super chat. I sent a DM on Patreon. I just finished building my first 5-inch using RC Night Eagle 3 micro camera. The video is black and white. Any idea how to get color? Nate, if you've got a Night Eagle, A Night Eagle is probably, I'm not 100% sure, Nate, but I think the Night Eagle is black and white. It's a night camera. It's a starlight camera. I think it's always black and white. I know I've flown the night. By the way, the Night Eagle is pretty. They're pretty rare. I think they may not be making them anymore. So you got a real gem of a camera there. I think the Night Eagle is a starlight camera and will only do black and white, but it's a Runcam Night Eagle. What camera is it exactly? Let's see if we can find Eagle 3 Micro. Let's just see if there's any information about this camera, like sample footage. Yeah. Well, Night Eagle 3. Yeah, look at what we got here. No music, thank you. The Night Eagle 3 is black and white. Night Eagle 2, Night Eagle 3 are black and white. Yeah, those are just black and white cameras. See? Nope, there's no way to get color. I don't think there's any way to get color. Like, is there any color there? That just looks like VTX, a little bit of noise in the VTX. It is one of the best, if not the best, low-light FPV cameras, for the record. The Night Eagle, look how good look how much noise there is in the Night Eagle 2 compared to the Night Eagle 3. It's a very, very good low-light camera. But, God, look how good it is. Look how much noise there is. Yeah. So you could go with a different camera, but if you want color, you pick the wrong camera. Alrighty. There we go. We're caught up. Sharkbite FPV asks, is it true that DJI is better with concrete penetration and Sharkbite's better with nature like trees? I think that I know why people say that. I'm not sure I agree, but here's why people say that. First of all, DJI does have better penetration and range. It does that because of magic and money. DJI has fairly sophisticated technology and a lot of, so it just is, and it has more output power. So, yes, DJI, I think everyone who tests them will agree that DJI has better penetration and range than HD0. Okay, so set that aside. Why do people say that HD0 is better? Like, I've heard people say in the forest, HD0 is better. And the reason is, I think the reason is that DJI uses a compression algorithm similar to what you see on YouTube or in MP4 videos. It uses a compression algorithm, and when there is a lot of moving detail, it gets very blocky. It can get blocky and lose detail. DJI, it's really important when you test DJI versus HD0 that you at least somewhat look at moving images. Because in a still image, DJI will always crush HD0 because still images play to the compression algorithm of DJI. It can show every little bit of detail because nothing is moving, so the compression gets very efficient. When an image is moving quickly and has lots of detail, then the compression algorithm struggles and does less of a good job, and it'll get blocky. Whereas HD0 doesn't compress at all. So HD0 you could say has less detail, but it has the same amount of detail all the time. Now, both of them are subject to motion blur. So if you've got a camera and you're in a low light situation and the shutter speed of the camera is opened up and you got a lot of motion blur, both of them will have a blurry image. That's a different thing. But if you're moving through trees where there's a lot of leaves and foliage and branches, sometimes DJI can struggle, especially if you're a little far away and therefore you're not quite at the full bit rate. DJI can struggle and get blocky and smeary. And HD0, you can end up in a situation where HD0 looks better. So that's what I think that's from. I mean, I've flown both of them, and I think DJI does a pretty good job in the trees. In my experience, and granted, I'm not a Alex Vanover or a Heads Up FPV in terms of my piloting, but in my experience, when I'm in the thick of the trees, I'm usually going slow enough because I want to be able to see and avoid the branches that DJI is not struggling with the amount of detail it's trying to show me. So. Excuse me for the slurping. I know the chat's going to hate that. How is the delay in HD0 compared to DJI when flying behind buildings and trees? HD0 has less latency under most circumstances, and it has consistent latency. So if your focus is on latency, HD0 is the winner. Yeah. Aber the Ham says trees versus concrete should be frequency specific. There is a frequency related component there, Aber. 5.8 gigahertz. No, 2.4 gigahertz. 2.4 gigahertz is close to the resonant frequency of water molecules. That's why microwaves operate at 2.4 gigahertz. But 5.8 gigahertz, well, I mean, it's not quite double 2.4 gigahertz. It is true that water, moisture, literally water molecules, has more absorbing effect. And if its absorption, if it has an absorption peak at 2.4 gigahertz, it will also have some absorption at double that, but that would be 4.8 gigahertz, not 5.8 gigahertz. So I'm not convinced that there's obviously if you have leaves on the trees versus no leaves on the trees, there is a difference, but I'm not convinced that there's as much frequency specific effect there as people make it out to be. Concrete is not particularly frequency specific, except in as much as the concrete has water in it. Concrete, and I say this as a guy who has done years and years of Wi-Fi surveys in different types of buildings. That's where my experience comes from. I have done a lot of walking around in my previous life, walking around buildings, trying to see, and what I would do sometimes on some of these jobs is I would have an access point with me, a Wi-Fi access point on a stick or a tripod with a battery. And I would just set that down somewhere, and then I would walk around and I would measure the signal strength, and I would see the coverage pattern of the AP with the access point. And I can say that concrete, the absorption of concrete is not very frequency specific, except in as much as it has water in it. That's true for most things. Most things are not very frequency specific. The things that are frequency specific absorption are exceptions to the rule. For example, there's I think it's around 60 gigahertz. There is an absorption peak from oxygen in the atmosphere. Oxygen has an absorption peak at 60 gigahertz. So 60 gigahertz microwave links have extremely short range because the oxygen in the atmosphere absorbs that energy very effectively. That's a case where you've got a frequency-specific absorption peak. But in general, there's not, you'll lose the same number of dB at 900 megahertz compared to something else. It's not, there's no drastic difference there. Okay. What's your opinion on the Baby 8 Pro? Do you like it? Asks Hassan. I have tested it. I liked it. I have a review of it. Bannister Post says, after it rains, I get awful range in the forest with DJI. Water on the leaves kills it. I'm skeptical of this claim. I don't 100% disbelieve, but I'm a little skeptical. And I only say that, Bannister, I'm not trying to pick on you, Bannister Post. Like, people say, oh, yeah, I've noticed when there's fog in the air, my range is shorter. And that's total nonsense. Like, this is stuff that people study for satellite links. So there's a metric, and I don't have the tables in front of me. I'm not going to pull them up on the live stream. But there's a metric. How many dB per kilometer do you lose with fog in the air? And you're talking about kilometers of distance for satellite links or really long microwave links. And the amount is extremely small. Like, you might lose 1 dB per kilometer if there was torrential rain. So the idea that over the 200 or 300 meter distance of an FPV link, you're going to notice fog in the air, it's not true. And so when people say, oh, yeah, I've noticed, yeah, when there's fog in the air, I'm like, yeah, I think it's something else going on there. If the leaves are covered in water, it is plausible that they would get decreased range. Like, there is going to be some absorption there, but I think there's some chance that there's something else going on there. So I would take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. Just a little grain of salt. Athix says, I know water in RG6 and RG11 coax kills the signal. That's because the moisture gets into the dielectric and changes the impedance of the dielectric. I'm not saying it's not the water on the leaves. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that is a commonly misinterpreted thing, and there may be another explanation. I'm not saying you're wrong. You could be right. Okay. Trees are worse than concrete for penetration, says AH for quad's sake. That depends. Here's a little known fact about concrete, unless you work in concrete, then you already know this. So concrete cures over time. And as concrete cures, the moisture content goes down. And that curing process continues to happen for 20 years. I don't know how long. It's a long time. I've been in buildings. I've done Wi-Fi surveys in buildings where it was a brand new building, like a new hospital, and they had just poured the concrete, a few months ago. And it had a huge amount of absorption. There was very little Wi-Fi penetration, and we needed a shitload of access points to get the coverage they needed. I've been in military barracks that were built 30 years ago, and the concrete was practically as much absorption as like a sheetrock wall. It was very little absorption, which is really counterintuitive, because you see this 12-inch slab of concrete and you're like, oh my God, that must have so much absorption. And it turned out that all the moisture had gone out of the concrete over time, and it actually had very, very little absorption. It was really counterintuitive how much it was dependent on the moisture in the concrete. The actual concrete itself was actually not absorbing as much as you would think. My goodness, Jack Lenoir, you've not spammed the chat, Jack, but I have seen this question kind of go by, and each time it's gone by, there's been something else I kind of was talking about or wanted to talk about, and I let it pass. But Jack has been asking this question since the beginning of the stream. It's finally time for him to get an answer. How is your DIY 2000 watt 24 volt server PSU holding up? Have you had to replace anything? What's the most you've used it? So Jack, I did replace one of the power supplies. It stopped working. And this is going to be really obtuse to anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, but do you know how when I did this mod, there were 3 screws that I had you isolate from the case? 2 in the front near that, well, I guess technically it's the back. 2 in the back near the output, and 1 up near the plug. People in the chat told me that you actually shouldn't isolate the screw near the plug because it needs to be connected to ground and it's not connected to the output. And if you actually do that, you may kill a part of the power supply. It's possible that that's why mine died. But the second one's been running forever. So I have replaced that. I've replaced one of the PSUs. Other than that, though, it just runs forever and has had been no problem whatsoever. Okay. I hope that's what you were looking for. LKLDE wants to know, why did JB say fog does not affect, video at like 400 meters? Can someone clarify? All right, here's what we're going to do. Let's see if I can find this chart. That's optical fiber loss. Here we go. Atmospheric absorption at sea level. Attenuation dB, no. Let's see if we put... There we go. This is it. This is the one. Is this... Did I... Look, it's an old post. It's an old post from 2014 where I addressed this exact issue. Wow! 2014. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. Oh, man. That's hilarious. Oh. Okay, so here's the chart. This chart shows average atmospheric absorption. Hang on. Of millimeter wave signals from environmental moisture, blah, 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 blah. The chart shows moisture reference for between 7.5 grams per cubic millimeter of water and 1 gram per cubic millimeter of water. What kind of real-world conditions does that represent? A cloud, and what is fog except for clouds? A cloud is between 0.03 and 3 grams per cubic millimeter of moisture. With light clouds, you could expect less than 0.004 dB per kilometer of attenuation. With heavy clouds, you could expect less than 0.01 dB per kilometer. Here's another chart that shows rain fade attenuation. And under worse than monsoon conditions, we get to 0.1 dB per kilometer at about 4 gigahertz. In other words, at the kind of distances we're talking about, generally less than a kilometer, 5 gigahertz signals are just not noticeably affected. And 5.8 gigahertz is not an exact multiple of 2.4 gigahertz. Nope, that's wrong. Wow. June 2019, this guy came back to disagree with me. I should come back in 2022 to rebut him, but a dB loss is dB loss. You have not experienced a fade when a wind gust blows high humidity air. That just isn't a thing. It's just not a thing. It's just not a thing. No. Colliding air masses do not create reflective boundaries at high frequencies. That's just not. It's just not a thing. That's painful. Oh my goodness. That's painful. No, that's just not a thing. But the dB loss here, a 0.1 dB of loss is 0.1 dB, whether your incoming signal is at negative 60 or negative 90 dBm. You're losing the same amount, and as long as the result is enough, I mean, 0.1 dB per kilometer is just nothing. It's just nothing. So that's the takeaway. That's the takeaway. The amount of loss caused by fog is just so low. It just isn't. It isn't relevant. And anything you think you're seeing, if you think that, you know, moist air blowing off the ocean is causing your video to get worse, it isn't. Not at a distance of 1 kilometer. Not at a distance of 10 kilometers, probably. Clouds, no. Monsoon rain is still less than like 0.01 dB per kilometer. So, Drew Abbott, thank you for 449 pounds. What 2S toothpick would you recommend? How's the Crux 3? That's a 4S. That's a Crux 3.5. Not the Crux 3.5. What's the Crux 3? Crux 3. There we go. Happy Model Crux 3 is solid. If you're looking for a bind and fly, it's pretty solid. There's nothing wrong with it. Darwin FPV Tiny Ape Freestyle. It's a 2.5. Excuse me. It's a 2.5, not a 3, and it's not exactly a toothpick, but yeah, it's pretty solid. Excuse me. Got the hiccups coming on. I don't know what my deal is. Alrighty. Oh, we had a lot of juice in this. We've had a lot of juice in this live stream. Lots of technical stuff today. DBs and rain. And man, we're going to get a lot of live stream clips out of this one. But you guys were lucky enough to be here in person. Let's see here. Savage Bee. Newbie Drone Savage Bee. That's solid. You're right. That's solid. Is it 2S? Is the Savage Bee 2S? Oh, it is. That's solid. It's not bad. I think it's better on 1S than 2S, if I remember right. I can't remember, but I think it's only sort of nominally 2S. But I can't remember. Shady asks, with the increasing price of 4-in-1 ESCs, is it feasible to replace FETs if one ESC goes bad? Yeah, I mean, if you have the skill to replace the FETs, you can do it. Leave-U FPV. Leave-U FPV is good for that kind of thing. I don't know. Is he still posting? Let's see here. What was his last post? It was 5 days ago. Okay. So he does freestyle stuff, but he also... Oh, he's done a lot of freestyle stuff lately. He also does like teardowns and repair of electronic circuitry. I'm sure he has an ESC repair video. I'd have to search his content. 4-in-1 ESC diagnosing. There we go. So 4-in-1 ESC diagnosing live stream, right? 2 hours of him diagnosing fried ESC and so forth. So Leave-U FPV is who I would suggest. Let me just post a link here. What about the Tiny Hawk X? Is it the Tiny Hawk X? What's Emax's toothpick? Nanohawk. Is it the Nanohawk? I don't know if that's 2S either. That's not... That's... Yeah, that's a 65 though. That's not a 2. It's not a 3-inch. Yeah. Nanohawk X is 1S only. Anyway, he asked for 2S. All right, fair enough. Baby Hawk's 2. Baby Hawk, 3.5-inch. Solid, but like technically, if someone asked me for a toothpick, I'm not sure that's what I would give them. What's the price point that everyone just breaks and abandons 4-in-1s and starts looking for individual ESCs? Yeah, that's probably coming, isn't it? We're going to go back to all-in-one flight controllers or separate PDBs. Jeez, because they're getting so damn expensive. I don't know what the price point is, but it's probably getting close. The people in the chat keep asking me if I have shown my website. Okay, it's time for a little ad read. It's an ad read for me. This is my website, the Ultimate FPV Shopping List. It's at my domain, fpvknowitall.com. You know that, right? fpvknowitall.com, home of the Ultimate FPV Shopping List, which is where I put product recommendations in lots of different categories. We just added the Tiny Whoop page. There's a page for 5-inch racing drones, 5-inch freestyle drones, 4-inch freestyle drones, sub 250 gram. There's a lot of freestyle stuff there. You know, I talk about what I know. I've recently started pulling in help from Aaron Ciotti, who helped me put together the Tiny Whoop page, because he knows way more about Tiny Whoops than I do. Got a little paragraph about why we think this is good, why we picked it. And we're working on a Cinewhoop page right now, actually. So it's a great way to support the channel, because these are all affiliate links, which means every time you click those links, I get a commission. We recommend different parts. We have a weekly meeting. If I would not have thought when I quit my day job and went into business for myself as a YouTuber, that the day would come when I would have a weekly meeting with a team. My website team has a weekly meeting where people ask, how often do you update the shopping list? Well, I mean, like, some pages get updated more than others. We're always looking for stuff that has gone out of stock or stuff where a new version has come out that's better. But we don't put new stuff on the list just because it's new. I don't think that serves the people the best. Yeah. There you go. I need to get some TPS reports from these people. That's exactly right. What are we going to see in HD0 section on the site? Asks Tim Barth. Yeah, good question. HD0 certainly has matured to the point where it could be recommended. When it first came out, like some of the VTXs were a little flaky, and I didn't 100% want to dive too heavily into it. Sorry if you heard that. No, you didn't hear that. Okay. I didn't too much want to dive into it, but now it's certainly mature. The problem is that it's just out of stock all the time, but hey, what can you do? Like I say, it would be good to add, though, wouldn't it? Right now, there's not as much. I mean, if you want HD0, buy it. The thing is that people also use it for comparison shopping. So, for example, what we really would need is, we would need maybe to change this section. I don't know. Would we change this to be digital FPV and do a comparison between them? Yeah. That's interesting. Like, right now, like, if we look at 5-inch freestyle, the VTX and the cameras are on the 5-inch freestyle page. But there's no DJI here. DJI is... What in the F is going on here? What in the F and F? Hello? What in the F? Oh my God, this is coming up in the meeting. What in the dickens? Oh. My goodness. What is the... Hold on a second. There we go. All right. Sorry you had to see that. I didn't mean to be so rough with him. But we have to have standards. So we put the analog stuff on the page, but then we put the DJI stuff just on its own page. Part of the reason is for SEO, for search engine purposes, it's better to have DJI in the URL and in the page title. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, that's the main reason that I don't have HD0 on here, because I would have to rearrange the whole site. Yeah. So anyway, that's my website. Use it. I get money when you use it. You notice there's no... Do you notice there's no advertising on the site either? Yeah. Don't click on any ads. Like, you can just use it. There's no ads anywhere. Because ads are annoying. And I just want you to use my affiliate links. So. Chris Jones. Thank you for a $5 super chat. Is there some reason my TBS Unify Pro is resetting my banded channel to B1 every battery change? Oof. Yes. What is it? The first thing I would do in this case, Chris, is I would go into the ports tab of Betaflight and I would disable smart audio, assuming you've got it enabled. And then I would change band and channel using the button on the Unify. And that would tell you whether your flight controller is what's making the change. It's possible that Betaflight flight controller wants it to be on B1, and you're changing the band and channel some other way. Like you press the button, but then when you power cycle, Betaflight puts it back on B1. People are telling me that B1 is the default channel in the VTX table in Betaflight. Huh. That's interesting. So, Chris Jones, I suspect that it's related to this. Here's what else you could do. Two things you could do, Chris. The first thing you could do is, in Betaflight, go to the video transmitter tab and just, first of all, you want to see device ready, yes. Now, you don't see that here because there literally is no video transmitter. This is just a flight controller loose on my desk. You want to see device ready, yes. And you're going to need to have your battery plugged in and your video transmitter powered up. Device ready, yes. And then come over here, and I don't have an effing VTX table loaded either. Hold on. Ridiculous. Can I load this VTX table? Hold on. See how easy that was? Presets are awesome. Video transmitter. Okay. So then come over here and do band, race band, channel 8, power 25. Save. Down in the lower right, you can't. Down in the lower right, hit save. And that is going to, now you will see over here on the right side, band channel frequency. This is now what the flight controller is requesting from the VTX. And at that point, if smart audio is working, the VTX will change to that channel and should stay there. Alternatively, what you can do is go to the ports tab and just disable smart audio. And at that point, the flight controller will not be able to affect the VTX. And if it still goes to B1 every time you power cycle, it's something to do with the VTX itself, not the flight controller. Chris Jones, if you're changing it in the video transmitter tab and hitting save, it should preserve that. Presumably it works when you make the change, Chris. So TBS My VTX could be overriding it. I don't think so. Because you've either got smart audio hooked up to the flight controller or you've got it hooked up to the receiver. Could you have wired smart audio to both the flight controller and the receiver? Seems like a long shot. Did you do that, Chris? TBS My VTX wouldn't work unless smart audio was wired from the VTX to the receiver. But if he's got the flight controller working, you could theoretically wire them both up, but that wouldn't make sense. Only to the flight controller. Okay, Chris, here's what I would suggest you do. Disable smart audio in the ports tab, change the band and channel with the button, and see if it stays there or if it goes back to B1. People are pointing this out. What? People in the what GIF? Oh, this GIF. People are joking about this GIF. That's this video. This is an old live stream replay. Here's Vanover. This kid thinks he can fly. He's okay. Bubby, you watch Daddy Vanover. You know, you want to see what to do. No! You son of a... No! Shut up! Shut up. What did I smack? A quad. No, a book. It looks like it's Christian Malika's book. Sorry, Christian. Oh. Let's continue the live stream. Oh, goodness gracious. Anyway, there you go. That's how I would troubleshoot that, Chris Jones. Technician in the Discord asks, I'm building your ultimate racing drone from last year. I have the Switchback Pro frame, and I had to go with a different ESC. Yeah, oops. So there's a problem with that alternate ESC, is that the battery patch touch the stand-ups. They're way too close. That is a good ESC, and I do recommend it. Is it possible for you to just rotate it 90 degrees? Like, I agree that's a problem. I would not do that. Okay? I wouldn't run like that. That's going to short out, and you're going to kill something. You could file the pads down. Yes. So if you were to Dremel the pads down a little bit, it would probably be okay. Technician, no one can see. No one can effing see what I'm looking at, because I didn't effing change my camera. So whoops, sorry. Bad live stream. Bad streamer. This is what he's got going on. I wouldn't fly like that. No, sir. I would Dremel that down, or I would rotate the ESC 90 degrees. It's not touching yet, is it? It's not touching yet. It sure is close though. So yeah. Anyway, you could file it down. You could file it down. You'd be all right. Dremel it down. But I agree that unfortunately, I recommend that ESC because it's one of the other good 20 millimeter ESCs. It's like, and I don't want to recommend an ESC that's just going to pop on you, but it does have that problem with that frames. Sorry. Don't use nylon standoffs. No. That's not a good decision. Ghost Branch FPV. Good to see you again, my friend. Hope you're doing well. If you need a reliable, low latency, long range control link, but the only Express LRS hardware available is Beta FPV, would you still choose it over Crossfire? Reliability being the most important factor. So let's break this question down. Express LRS as a technology is as reliable as Crossfire. In terms of link reliability and range, it is on par with Crossfire. Some would argue better. We're not going to go there. In terms of the maturity of the code, it's there. It's just there. There are no hidden gotcha bugs in Express LRS that will suddenly cause you to failsafe for no reason. Now, I know that out there are stories of people who are like, oh, I put Express LRS on my quad and it failsafed at 20 feet. Yeah, the same stories exist for Crossfire. Usually it's user error, probably. Not always, but probably sometimes. So in terms of the system, the ecosystem as a whole, Express LRS and Crossfire are on par. Then the question is, what's the reliability of the hardware? And overall, I don't think anybody would dispute that TBS builds better hardware than Beta FPV. So that answers your question. TBS. Beta FPV can make good hardware. My opinion is that Beta FPV makes two kinds of mistakes. One is design mistakes, where they don't put the right capacitor on a board or something. They put the wrong oscillator on a board. I think it was Flywoo who did that, not at Beta FPV. Or they design a piece of hardware like the light radio, and the way that they solder the wires on is just bad, and they break off. Beta FPV makes design mistakes, and the other is that sometimes they have quality errors. Another design mistake was the heat dissipation on their 1 watt Express LRS module is not adequate. The way the fan blows air over it doesn't work, and it doesn't get to full power sometimes. So if I had a Beta FPV Express LRS module that I had been using for a while and was convinced it was working, I would think it would keep working. But if I was buying fresh and I needed to know that the hardware is going to be reliable, I'd go Crossfire all the way. Yeah. Ghost Branch says, I'm pondering going Express LRS, but I can only get the Beta FPV stuff here, and I hear the module's getting really hot, even with the fan. That had me worried. That's valid. It's valid, Ghost Branch. I mean, if you're tempted to play with Express LRS, then go ahead and get that module, and maybe you only run it at 500 milliwatts or 250 milliwatts. Yeah. Or get Ghost. Oh, Athix points out you can flash Express LRS to Ghost hardware. Yeah. Ghost Branch, I'm surprised you can't get, like, Happy Model. Even if you order from China? No? Maybe it's just too expensive. Folks, we're coming up on the end of the stream. We got about 5 minutes left in the stream. Ciotti is going to be streaming after me. Ciotti, Aaron Ciotti. Post that link, buddy. He's going to be streaming at 3. Are you streaming today, Ciotti, or are you out flying? If I were you, I'd be flying. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon in Atlanta, and I think you've got somebody in town with you. Anyway, if he is streaming, he'll post the link, and I'll let you know. Wes Magyar wants to know, have you tried resin printing for FPV stuff? No. Wes, the thing is, Wes, for FPV stuff, you always want flex filament, flex polymer. Anything rigid is just going to explode. And resin is very good. It has extremely good resolution, smooth surface, fine detail. There's so many things that resin is good at, but there aren't really great resin, flexible resins. They do exist, but they're kind of expensive, and they're still not as good as TPU in terms of flexibility, durability, etc. For flex printing, FDM is really still the state of the art. Well, it's probably not the state of the art, but on a hobbyist budget, it's the way to go. Psych Limbo agrees with me. So resin printing, extremely tempting for anything where you're doing rigid, like miniatures, anything where you're doing rigid and you need a lot of detail and good finish quality. Resin is very, very good. But FDM is still very good for flex. Let's see how do you post the link. He is streaming, then flying after. All right, where's the link, dude? Post the link. True Gent, thank you for a $5 super chat. I'm in need of a new all-in-one for my Baby Hawk. What's a good replacement? For the Baby Hawk, don't you just need to get the Emacs flight controller? Like, I wouldn't put it past Emacs to do some bullshit proprietary mount. What about aluminum frames? Baskin FPV. Somebody's selling an aluminum frame right now. Here's what I think about that. Hang on. I need Chris Rosser. I actually recently asked Chris Rosser about that. And Chris gave me this. Chris Rosser said this is the reason why aluminum quadcopter frames are not a good idea. Well, that wasn't a direct quote. This is a graph of specific strength to weight. And obviously for quadcopters, we want a high strength to weight ratio. But these are not the only criteria. So here are metals and alloys, and here are composites. And this is stiffness versus strength. And the bottom line is that composites, like carbon fiber, have an extremely good stiffness and strength to weight ratio. That's the takeaway. Metals can be stronger and stiffer. It looks like they can be stiffer and just as strong, but they're also heavier. And I don't know where aluminum specifically comes in here. Chris says specific strength versus specific stiffness. Yeah. And basically carbon fiber is the good one. The other thing to keep in mind about aluminum is that carbon fiber will bend and bend back, whereas aluminum is less capable of doing that. So there's Ciotti's link. So yeah, Ciotti is going to be doing Betaflight setup on the 250. There's a link to his. He's posting it. Espander points out they make supercars, F1 cars, and pro-grade bicycles out of aluminum. Yeah, Espander, for those applications, the problem is that carbon fiber is very difficult to machine. So anytime you're doing anything other than a sheet of carbon fiber, it's generally laid up by hand. At least that's what Chris said. And so it's extremely expensive to make complicated shapes out of carbon fiber. Whereas aluminum, you can use standard metalworking to mill it, to machine it, to press it, do a break or whatever, and shape it. So the reason vehicles are made out of aluminum is that it is very, very expensive to make carbon fiber in those sizes and shapes. The other thing is that aluminum's failure modes are well understood. So testing for micro cracks in aluminum is well understood, whereas carbon fiber, and again, I'm just repeating what Chris Rosser told me, so no credit to me for this. Carbon fiber has some failure modes that are difficult to predict, and so they don't like to make vehicles out of carbon fiber because you don't want it to suddenly break and fail catastrophically. F1 cars are largely carbon fiber. Now, that's a case where the price is irrelevant, and the only thing that matters is performance. And carbon fiber does have better, and it shows that carbon fiber has better performance than aluminum. So carbon fiber performs better than aluminum, but when making complex and large shapes out of it is more expensive. In the case of a quadcopter, we don't need large and complex shapes because we're just cutting it out of a sheet. So carbon fiber is less expensive and has better performance than aluminum for our uses. There's literally no reason why an aluminum quadcopter frame is better than a carbon fiber one, except that it's cool. That's it. Yeah, there you go. This aluminum frame, it's cool, it's cute, it's novel, it's not better in terms of price, strength, weight, and stiffness. Yeah, it looks cool. That's what it's got going for it. Alrighty, folks, that is going to wrap us up for this live stream. Everybody go watch Ciati's live stream next. He's posting the link. Thank you so much for you guys coming out, and I'll see you tomorrow at 8 p.m. and throughout the week. Happy flying, everybody, and have a great stream, Ciati. I'm out of here.